Welcome to What Writers Should Know. I am Erica Lance. I'm an author and I'm the CEO and founder of Four Horsemen Publications. And with me today is Valerie Willis, who's an author and a co-founder of Four Horsemen Publications. And we're here today to talk about how open mics changed my writing.
I see.
And Valerie wrote the title to this, so Valerie has to tell us how open mics changed
tell
her
you
writing.
guys.
Valerie?
So, okay, we've all been in this dilemma where we're just trying to find our local tribe, whether in person and stuff. I wasn't necessarily looking, at this point in time, I wasn't necessarily looking for a critique group per se, but just a means to share my work, experiment my work, and just get some more instantaneous feedback in a different sense. And someone had recommended, I was at a gathering for National Novel Writing Month, and someone had said, hey, there's this open mic group that's been around for years, you should give them a try. And I was like, man, they're in my backyard practically. So I started going, and I was pleasantly surprised. One, I was surprised because of the content and local authors and local talent was very interesting, and I was getting exposed to things I don't necessarily read or would choose to read, but hearing those little snippets was a little eye-opening. So I was now picking up things, and I finally got brave enough, and I said, okay, what was it? I think the first thing I read was more literary because everyone else was more literary, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up reading a short story I had written called Memories of Orange Groves. And it's sort of like, it was a writing prompt that I wanted to use all five senses, I had to rotate between all five senses. And it was basically an ode to my childhood with my dad, romping around in the orange groves and stuff. And of course, everyone was just like gushing over it. So it was this nice, like, well-received thing. They're very kind. And then I read another piece the next time I went, and the main guy, Jeff Rambert, pulled me to the side, and he says, I'm going to give you a bit of advice. And I had never thought about this. He says, before you read your piece, he says, try altering it to be read out loud. He says, a lot of us write, he says, you publish. He says, so you're, he says, some of these guys talk about eventually publishing. He says, but you're published. He says, so you write your content to be read. He says, but it's not the same as being read out loud. And he went through, because I had printed it out, and it was testing material. He says, I would change, and he made recommendations, right? And it really, ever since that day, I really started re-looking at how I write. And I've also noticed, especially with book talk, right, how other authors have also sort of subconsciously picked up on this, is that we've now come to a point as writers where we're changing how we write with audiobooks and being read out loud in mind. And it changes how you write that prose, because now you're thinking about how it bounces out of the mouth. Will it be understood read out loud, and things like that. Like, I used to intermingle my internal dialogue within the narrative, and now I break it out where it's almost like its own dialogue tags, because I want to be able, if I read out loud, I skip those parts because the context still hits the same. We're just now seeing it in a different way, or presenting it in a different way. So it's very interesting. What are your thoughts, Erica?
My thoughts, it's funny because ironically, going to an open mic, which I did with a group called Wordier Than Thou. It's a nonprofit in the Tampa Bay area back when I lived down in Florida. And Tiffany, shout out to you. Love you. Tiffany, which is ironically how we ended up meeting through a series of events linked to having joined Wordier Than Thou.
Wordier Than Thou.
Yeah.
And just for anyone who was wondering what group, the group out of Orlando is Central Florida Writers and Thereabouts. You can find them on Facebook. They did online ones, and I have funny stories of the kind of connections you can also make with open mics. But go ahead.
Yes, no, totally. And so I met a lot of people. I even met a co-author that I write with through Wordier Than Now. But one of the things I thought was really interesting is I went and they do these events where it was a 10-minute prose, right? You go and you read 10 minutes of your story. And I will tell you one thing reading your story out loud will do. Man, you will hear the errors. You will hear what does not flow. You will hear every mistake you've made in your story. You will hear it, and not in a negative way, but it really makes a huge difference because you see where your punctuation is failing because you cannot read it the way it's written, right? Like you go, I can't read this. And it's, of course, a good practice to read it out loud at home. But I feel like when you have an audience, it's very different, right? And with my stories, as you know, like I write horror stories and I write humorous erotica, but I write horror stories that don't have happy endings. And one of the things with doing those little horror stories, I was writing short stories at first, that I found was every time I read one of my stories, the audience, if they did this at the end, like is that the end? Because of course they're waiting for the happy ending, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I go, thank you very much. I knew I nailed it when I would get the reaction where the applause would only come after I indicated I was done, right?
Yes.
Because they were like, what? Huh? And then, you know, some of the people that I got to know there, which is the tribe part, would say, okay, how many people died? I couldn't keep track when I was reading because they're like, or they'd meet somebody or they'd be talking and they're like, yeah, no, just prepare for it. Somebody's going to die. And so it was funny because I got the feedback, but I started seeing when it was impacting. Did I have it? Did I hold the reader's attention? Was my suspense in the right place? And I watched the audience when other people would read, and some like you just get riveted, and others you're like, this just sounds like the teachers from the Peanuts, and you're not even hearing the story because, like, not because of how they're reading it, but because how that story is written.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Even in the short time, now that I think about it, I joined them before COVID and went through COVID with them. And I feel, I now have a day job that keeps me from being able to attend. So it drives me crazy these days. But it's interesting because I could test out different genres, different angles, different scenes, things that it's frustrating because you only get so many minutes. Depending on the open mic you go to, sometimes you only get 5 minutes. Sometimes they give you up to 10 minutes. I think our limit was 8 minutes, but a lot of times if they like you, they let you go over. For Halloween, the first Halloween with them, I read, and this is in a book that Four Horsemen carries. Demonic Wildlife has my short story called Antichrist is a Manatee, right? And it's the whole vision of SeaWorld's manatee observation deck vibes there. But reading that, and of course, I decided to write, when I wrote that, I wrote it with the advice I'd gotten with the open mic, right? I wrote this so I could do voices for the manatee and the little girl and things like that, and really upped the juiciness of the fact that this was going to be read out loud. And to this day, everyone loves that story. And when I read it for the first time, to hear that cafe, it was a cafe bar called Stardust over there, Stardust Video and Coffee over in Orlando by Lou Gardens. And to hear that building go quiet and people giggle and go, ooh, like just to hear the audience react to the things as I was going through that story. And now I get requests to do that one at the open mic for years afterwards. But the other thing that open mic group does and has done for me is they also challenge me. they'll put up a challenge. So one of the challenges, I know you love this story, was that we had to read something we weren't comfortable reading. And it ensured that everyone was genuine with their pick.
I need to prepare the audience watching right now that Valerie's about to turn a different color. Let's I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee. Let's go.
All right. And so to make it fair, we all drew names out of a hat, and that person picked what we were reading. And I didn't know what I was reading until I got there, and I get there, and I believe it was Tanya that got to pick for me. And at this point, this one was at the Copper Rocket. We did themes every night, and she says, "You're reading that saucy scene from the Oracle, where they break the vanity." And I'm like, oh no, I have to read one of my saucy scenes. Now, granted, Cedric's like heat level 3-4. The language is dumbed down, so it's safe for reading at an open mic, but it's very clear what is going on in this scene. And I get up there, everyone is like gathering up, like moving their chairs closer. I said, "Oh, you guys suck." And I'm like, "But I can't face you. So I'm going to turn around and face the corner, and I'm just going to focus on just reading this scene. Let me know when my 8 minutes is up." And they go, yeah. I realized I had been reading for almost into the chapter. And I write really long chapters. They're definitely like 12-minute plus reads if I read the whole chapter, most of my fantasy novels. And I realized the guys who were playing pole on the other side, like the whole bar has felt so like the music and jukebox has been turned off. Someone coughed and it startled me because it was so loud. And I finally turned around, and of course my face is red. And all the staff are leaning against the closest part of the bar. Like everyone's listening. So this intense scene in the third book of the series had gotten, and the guys are leaning on their pool tables and they're like, "No, keep going." And I'm like, "I don't think I can it." And then of course the bar owner's like, "It just started getting hot." And he reaches over, he hits a button, and the fog machine starts going off. And I'm like, "That's it, I'm done. I can't." You guys got more than what you were supposed to.
And I love that, because me and you, I tease you all the time about reading the saucy scenes, because I write erotica. You write erotica under Honey Cummings, throwing that out there for anybody who's listening. And it is for some people, but that's one thing I wanted to bring up, is that some authors would be sitting here going, "No, I'm not getting up in front of people. I'm not reading. I'm not doing that." Right. But the truth of the matter is, you have to put yourself out there, and you don't have to be you on stage. You have to be your author persona on stage. The moment you publish a book, literally legally, you can look this up, which we'll go into in another What Writers Should Know, is you are a celebrity. You legally are defined as a celebrity now. Right. And so the rules about defamation and all that apply to you as a celebrity versus a normal private citizen. So you have to have a persona as the writer, and you need to be willing to put yourself out there. Don't make eye contact. You don't have to imagine everybody naked or in their underwear or whatever, like that they tell you to do sometimes. But just get up there, look down at your writing, begin, and time yourself if you have to. Know if it's 5 minutes, because usually it's a certain number of pages, so you know
like
how far you can.
1,000 words is what I figured out. On average, 1,000 words should be about 5 to 8 minutes, depending how much dialogue and how slow or fast. And don't try to read fast. Breathe. Like, in fact, one of Jeff's earlier recommendations was to put a highlighted mark to remind myself when to breathe, or where the punctuation was.
It's great. And you can practice at home if you have to. But here's the deal. 99% of these open mics that you'll find that want open mic pros, and they're all over the place. They can be in a bar. Mine was in an art studio. We did a pub crawl, which we did reading at a pub crawl, which was tons of fun. That, and I like to drink, that drinking with authors, it's a thing. But you can, when you're doing this, you just get up and do it. Like, be willing to be there, because you, the celebrity, the author, those are your people, not only other authors, but they may be your readers. So make sure when you go to these things that you take your business cards with how to get to your website and stuff, how to order your books. If you want to, sometimes bring a couple books in your bag that you can sell to people, because people buy them, right?
And
I mean,
sometimes
we joke that you like to sell crap out of your trunk. So
I do. I can't tell you how many times I've read a chapter or two to test out material out of either a work in progress or a book I've already written that I was curious about how this lands, how the audience reacts. And like I said, it's much different than a critique group, right? We're actually there to perform and practice the performance and get feedback on our performance in a safe environment is what it really should be. And because I would hate to go to a convention where I'm actually in front of a way bigger audience with a lot more pressure and a lot more judgment. So this is a great way to get those jitters out and that practice and performance in on a live audience. But I had when I was working on the second book for The Princess Priest, so The Priestess Assassin, I wasn't sure if a scene I had been massaging and revising was hitting emotionally like I wanted it to. So I walked up there and I said, okay, here's just cliff notes of what has led up to this point. And we're going to and I said, and I'm going to read like this emotional scene. I know that's beyond my norms. I'm sorry, guys, but I just need to know how it hits. So please give me some feedback when I come off the stage. I read that and 5 people were like, where can I buy the first book? Because they liked what they heard so much. And I was like, okay, I hit the points I wanted. And that told me immediately that it was, and again, when you've got the way you're reading out loud and your story's content is hitting sharply when you make a room go quiet. There is something thrilling and very intimidating at the same time when a noisy cafe or bar setting, which is where most of these typically happen at, just goes dead quiet and you've got everyone's attention because whatever you're reading or whatever your characters are doing has their attention. You're on the right way. It's a great indication that your writing is going in the right direction.
I agree. And one of the things you can do too is go show up to one of these and just observe the first time. See what it's like. Understand how it works. Ask questions. But I will say this, and I'm going to do a shout out. I don't know, to Austin, to Trish, to Tiffany. Like, I met you. There are so many people that have become my tribe and become some of my best friends in this universe that I met because of going to open mics, because these are fellow writers and they're not all perfect and they're not all wonderful. And trust me, not every story you hear is going to be a diamond gem. Like, it's not, but you find your tribe. You're around people who are there and want to be a part of what you're doing and want to talk to you and want to connect. Because again, we talk about this a lot. Writing is a solo sport. Most writing, like even if you're on a thing with somebody else, you're doing it by yourself. So find your tribe. But going out and hearing your story out loud, right, will also give you practice when you're doing it at home. Because if you do it before you leave your house, you will hear, sorry, my little puppy, you can see him in the background, just heard a noise. I apologize. But you will find that you understand how all of that works 1,000 times better than, and what it sounds like. Because when people are reading, even though they're not reading out loud, it's the same thing. They see the failures in punctuation and things like that you're doing, the impact of the statement, the reveal, the whatever you're trying to do. And like I said, for you waited for it to go silent. I didn't always listen for the silence. I did listen for I just looked out to go.
You wanted to see the faces go.
The head tilt or the whispering to each other. I wanted them to have the what the F just happened look on their face. When I did that, I knew I did it. I knew my story had the impact. That moment had the impact because they had the look on their face like, Did did did
Did
she
that
just
just
kill
happen?
someone? So you'll know what your thing is, whether it's laughing, whether it's sighing, whether it's gasping. There's a reaction you want. Go and see if you can get that reaction with your
If it's a
writing.
romance scene, you'll see like this and the sigh, right? It's, and like I said, it's not like a normal critique. You're not necessarily going to get feedback on a grammar level, so to speak, but you are going to get a developmental reaction that, did I develop this scene? Is this scene emotionally, is the reader immersion there, right? And I have to say, there was a couple of people who would always attend those open mics at Central Florida and thereabouts, who didn't write or wrote a little, but they loved reading other people's work too. So if you're too bashful but still want to see how your work, there are people there at these open mics that you can connect with and partner up with, who are more than willing to read it. At one point, we started doing almost like a live radio show, where a few of us would get together and we would convert it into a script style, and we would go up there as a group and perform out the short stories and stuff, and it was just so fun to watch, because it got to the point that some people were writing stories specifically about the people playing themselves a little bit. It was just,
I love that.
it
But
was
I think
so
that's
fun.
the thing. I mean, there is nervousness. It's a nervous thing getting up there. What you need to do is go up there. If you have to take a moment, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and read. And I agree with you on the grammar and stuff. This isn't to fix your grammar. The only fixing of grammar is this doesn't read well.
Yeah.
That's one thing you will run into when you start doing this, is you'll go and you'll fumble over some of it, which is fine. Take a
Fine.
breath,
That's what
keep
you're there
going.
for. Yep.
Nobody cares that you fumbled over it, but
And
you will
don't
make a
kill
little.
yourself. And on
Yeah.
that same point, don't kill yourself reading verbatim. You initially wrote this probably not with open mic or reading out loud in mind. And like I said, it's really interesting when I compare, like Cedric would be a great example. Cedric was not written for open mic, but from Artemis on, and the Princess Priest and all Honey Cummings, all of that is since I've discovered all this information and feedback from open mic. And the writing style, I think, is much smoother. It reads much clearer. People seem to struggle less. It's not necessarily literary, so to speak, but I write genre fiction anyway. I'm not
You
aiming
know
to
what
be
though?
the
You know what
next
it
great
is?
American novel.
It's storytelling. You are a
Storytelling.
storyteller, and doing this will make you a better storyteller, because every book, my personal opinion, outside of, like, of course, textbooks and stuff, but every single book should be able to be read as a story, as a storyteller. You should be able to sit down, like, you watch The Princess Bride and he's reading him The Princess Bride. You should be able to do that with every story. It doesn't matter what kind of story it is. Now, I know some people who read the erotica books to each other, like couples or friends and stuff. And that needs to read the same way. Like, it doesn't matter what you write, it needs to read because you are a storyteller. So,
And I will say that most open mic groups also usually have other things they're doing. So I know with both Wordier Than Thou and Central Florida thereabouts, they host workshops. They have write-ins, and they talk about one time they rented a creepy old house before it was about to be torn down to go write in for the night.
oh
And they
yeah,
all
no, and
left prior.
we did one called Read No More. She still does it down in Tampa, Florida, where she has writers write a story for each room, and it's not a scene. They don't have to act it out. It's literally a story. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they do usually host a bunch of stuff. I know during COVID, because of we couldn't be in person, the cafes were basically all closed down here in Orlando during that time. We started double downing on doing a digital workshopping kind of mode, and we try to do the open mic and keep at least one open mic going, similar to that. and I did a character development. And it was funny because Eric Deckers, who's one of our Four Horsemen authors, was like, Val, I need someone to do a thing. And I'm like, oh, I want to teach character development. I haven't done that in a while. And I know people at the open mic always ask. And the first person to come into this room with us is freaking Nancy Springer, who writes Enola Holmes. And I'm like, you will never know who is part of your group in an open mic, and it may surprise you. I also have to say they're great supporters of when people do publish books, because what they'll do is say, hey, tonight we have a feature, have you read multiple times throughout the night to promote your book and read from your new book, and encourage, hey, don't forget, she's back there ready to sign, and just go over and say hi, so they're great supporters. They spread the word, they give you instant feedback, and just I don't know what I would have done without discovering open mics, and it definitely got me out of the house during a time I was having a hard time finding a reason to leave home. So
exactly, you need your tribe, and I am fortunate that you did that, because that's how we became besties, and how we created Four Horsemen wouldn't have come about if we hadn't met and hadn't done all that. So if you're a writer out there, we heavily suggest it. Even if you have to do it virtually, they're virtual. You can do searching. There are meetup groups, all kinds of things. Find the different groups in your area. Find the different writing coalitions in your area. Believe it or not, there are people out there. And it doesn't have to be a critique group. Sometimes critique groups are okay, and sometimes they're not pleasant places to be, unfortunately. But you will find open mics for prose out there are huge. Or if you're a poet, go out and find the poetry open nights.
Poetry slams.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't write poetry, but I used to attend the slams because the way they use abstract concepts, like, oh God, I still remember to this day, one of the guys says, she made love to me like it was caliente. And it was like, oh, like I like everything about that. You get a different visual. So it's very, as an author, being like I said at the beginning of this, being exposed to those different genres and writing styles. But I used to go to the poetry slams, and because it became such a huge regular, they would ask me to be one of the judges for the poetry slams and stuff. So that was always a good time. But yeah, there is and then of course I didn't realize that Orlando and Deltona over here both had teams that competed nationally and like ranked in like the top 10 half the time. So you'll be shocked what you find close to home.
Okay, so with that, we've gone a little longer than we normally do, but it's something we wanted you to know. You are a storyteller. Get your stories out there. This has been What Writers Should Know. I've been Erica Lance. This has been Valerie Willis. Don't forget, like, subscribe. All the links are down below in the show notes, and we will absolutely see you next time.